Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. That time of week again. Everybody's favorite segment, the MLB Power Rankings. Guys, the All-Star break is upon us. There is no Sunday nighter this week. And normally we film this before this, so all the games are in the books for the weekend, for the week. And now we get a few days break before we kick things off. There won't be a Power Rankings next week. Maybe I'll do another different fun video, maybe a live video on the channel around 5 Pacific time if we want to check that out. Give me your ideas if you have something for that. We're going to jump into it. I'm going to go over all 30 teams, and it's been a long day for me starting this a little bit late. I had my baby shower earlier today. It was absolutely a wonderful event. Went a little bit later than expected, but we're still doing the Power Rankings, all that fun stuff. Baby's due in a couple of months, maybe around September, so getting super excited about that, as you guys might know. Before I jump in, please, if you are new, subscribe to the channel. We are growing super quick, but I'm not going to go too far into that because I kind of want to start ripping through this. Number 30, keeping them in the same spot as last week. 1-3 against the Reds earlier in the week. So Colorado's kind of been that team that while they seem to have good luck at home, we see them go on the road and it's not really a team worthy of competing with pretty much anyone. Even in the bottom row, they struggle pretty significantly. They also lose to the Mets this weekend. So if you're a team looking to right your ship, you're hoping to play a lot of these bottom teams. Next up, we do have the Chicago White Sox. I think if it wasn't for Crochet, there wouldn't be any glimmering light on this team whatsoever. 1-2 against Minnesota, getting swept by the Pirates over the weekends. You can interchange these two teams any which way you like, honestly. But the fact that the White Sox beat the Rockies maybe 3 weeks ago now, might even be 4 weeks ago now, I still guess is that making that the decision maker. But with the All-Star break being over, we're going to see the trade deadline happening. One of these teams might be significantly worse, and it might finally settle who will be bottom. Number 28, another team fighting for that bottom spot. 0-3 against Houston. They also lost to the Cincinnati Reds this weekend in the series over the weekend. 2-1. Miami, offensively, very, very poor, just not getting it done, and especially against Houston this weekend, getting that sweep. Miami, arguably in the same category as these other teams. And the bottom row, it's quite boring to talk about week after week because for the most part, these first 5 teams are absolutely the same every week. We had the LA Angels at number 27 this week. We thought at one point that they might start to break out, but now after the past 2 weeks, it's been a little dicey. They did start the week 1-2 against Texas, and they had an interesting series, 3-1 against Seattle Mariners. And when they have that kind of spoiler in this division, we don't expect them to go any further outside the basement, maybe beating Oakland, right? But LA has times where they have glimmers of, they have a pretty strong offense. They put up quite a bit of runs. They have some pitching that does pretty well. Tyler Anderson having an amazing season, but they just have no consistency, and more times than not, they're losing. And when we start to get into the middling rows here, there are at least 500 teams, and LA just does not have it. Number 26, they had surprised me this time over the weekend. They absolutely put up, 18 runs today against the Phillies. They win the series against the Phillies. They go 500 this week, 1-2 against Boston to start the week. We've seen them now go against the AL East and be quite competitive. We did see the Oakland A's higher up in the power rankings earlier in the season. Now, if I had to wager, I might think out of all these 5 teams, the A's might have the best shot of moving it a little bit forward. These young guys starting to really get things going. Brent Rooker having pretty good season. If you watch my MVP video, I did a little speech on him, thinking he's the best player right now on the A's, getting them going. Overall, the depth of the A's isn't like absolutely terrible. You see some of these other teams, they're just missing the mark. And number 25 is a team that has just been missing the mark way too much lately. And I do have them in the bottom row. We have a new entry in the number 25 spot. If you're new to the channel, this spot has been pretty notorious this season to be a revolving door. Teams fall, they hit 25, and then they're like, whoa, this is way too bad. Let's start going the other direction. 26 and below have pretty much been the same teams all season, at least for the past 2, maybe 3 months. But number 25 has been pretty interchangeable, and this is the first time the Blue Jays are there. They did have a winning series against the Giants to start the week. They managed to avoid a sweep, although it was crazy against the Diamondbacks this Sunday, so they lose 2-1 in that one. So overall, 500 week for the Jays. But if we start kind of compounding what we're seeing in the Jays over the past few weeks, it's scary, and it's really time for panic in this team dead last in the American League East, so they do have that as well going for them. Almost blew a 7-run lead today. The bullpen has just been even worse than the offense. I could write a long video on what's wrong with the Blue Jays, but for now, I'm going to put them at number 25. Number 24, 3-0 against Baltimore, 2-2 against St. Louis. So a team that had been flirting at number 25 for a couple of weeks in a row. They had a pretty good week that you could not ignore, sweeping the Baltimore Orioles. While they are probably one of the top struggling teams in the MLB right now, going in and splitting a 4-game set with the Cardinals is something to build off. So going into the All-Star break, I think the Cubs have some good momentum that they can really build on. And in this division that is pretty much up for grabs, it makes it a little bit different than the teams in this bottom row. In my opinion, these teams in the bottom row are pretty far gone when it comes to the playoffs. You can start sniffing some playoffs in this row as long as you keep winning. And the Cubs kind of showed this week that they have what it takes to compete with teams in the upper echelon of this board, but we haven't seen that consistency, and that's why they're still down here. Number 23, a team that has tried to do that, but the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit. We didn't expect them to really compete for the playoffs. They were flirting with 500 for a few weeks there at a time. At times we see offense, some of these young guys showing some great skills. At times we see pitching, but then you see the depth of the pitching isn't quite there for Washington. Washington gets swept by the Mets, and then they respond by going 2-1 against Milwaukee. So it's a team that consistently is giving top teams some trouble. They are never an easy win whatsoever. And in a game, best of 3, they have a shot, I think, against all the teams on this board. It's just, they're young, and I feel like they are figuring it out compared to some of these others. But they got a long way to go. Well, all these other teams are starting to be a little bit stronger, maybe. Number 22, 3-1 against Colorado, 2-1 against Miami. So, Cincinnati, they've been lower than this for the past month at least. So they're doing the right thing this past week. They beat Miami, they beat Colorado, they're picking up some solid wins. They're in a division that they're flirting with 500. They want to get back in there, but the problem is they've fallen a little bit behind in terms of losing over the past month and a half, fallen a little bit behind the pace of the teams that are going to the playoffs. But Cincinnati, they're hungry, they're ready to do it. And they are right back in the hunt. Number 21. Pretty good week for this team. 3-1 against Cleveland, 2-1 against the Dodgers. Two teams that were in the top 5 last week on the power rankings, and then winning week. So pretty much ended the free fall that Detroit had been on for a number of weeks now. That's the kind of boost that they need going into the All-Star break. Another team that's kind of been on the free fall, falling down the standings, maybe talked about as not being in the playoff hunt. A lot of that probably has to do with their division being so strong. But with a week like this, if they can start to replicate some of this going forward, playing some 600 baseball, very possible for this Detroit Tigers team, they can start climbing back up, because this is going to be a thick fight for the second half of the season. Number 20, I have this team moving up a couple of spots. 2-1 against Milwaukee, 3-0 against the White Sox. Just an absolutely great week for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Too far between the last one, though. That's the kind of the problem we've seen. The Pirates just not usually having winning weeks. If anything, 500 weeks are pretty much the norm, or losing weeks. So the Pirates, they've fallen quite a bit down the standings, but we do see Paul Skeens having the absolute best season that we've seen a rookie pitcher have what feels like forever. He's going to be starting in that All-Star game. I think we all know that's going to be happening. Paul Skeens has been absolutely electric, and if you can send a guy like that out every 5 days and pick up that 1-0 win like we saw this week, this team is at least very threatable to win this division, and I'm not even going to call that crazy at number 20. Number 19, and the San Francisco Giants, they've just been consistently 500, and I'm not going to really hold them too far back, but they lost the series to the Blue Jays, and they really only won the one game against them because the Blue Jays bullpen fell apart for the 20th time in a row. They do beat Minnesota this weekend, so San Francisco continues to win series against top teams, kind of crap the bed against weaker teams, and never really get massive win streaks going whatsoever. I think in the grand scheme of things, they just don't have the talent and the depth to really put big winning streaks together. And to kind of start breaking out of this bottom second row, you do need to have some win streaks going. How else are you going to hop 12 teams in front of you to get into that top row? Number 18, we do have the Texas Rangers battling. That seems to be what I've been talking about with the Rangers all season long. And this week was no different. They went 2-1 against the Angels, and then 2-1 against Houston. Two division rivals that win a series. They had played the Angels a couple of weeks ago, and that did not look good. It really helped facilitate them falling down the board quite a bit, and me kind of considering the Angels coming out. And then this weekend to beat Houston, one of the hottest teams over the past couple of months, the team that they always have massive, crazy division battles all playoffs last year, all season last year, and all season this year. They win that series, and it feels like the momentum of the ex-World Series champions is starting to come to fruition. The one thing working for them is Seattle has struggled immensely. Houston isn't too far ahead of them because they struggled immensely to start the season. So Texas does not have a lot of ground to make up and a lot of runway to go. I think they are capable, and they're starting to climb up. Next team, Tampa Bay Rays, 2-1 against the Yankees, 2-1 against Cleveland. Again, Tampa Bay has been one of those teams that was slow. They were down in this threshold, and honestly, the second bottom row is really hard to sort out. It's almost like every team in these next couple of rows has at least flirted with the second bottom row, at least at one point during the season. Tampa Bay is no different. They're 500 now, and after a winning week against two top teams, they keep kind of putting that together. At least over the past month, it's been pretty incredible. And their defense and pitching has been a big part of that 2-0 win today, I believe. And another 4-2 win earlier in the week, and just some tight ball games, low scoring. They're never really giving up a bunch of runs, and that seems to be Tampa Bay's MO for life. Number 16, team I am starting to worry about. Definitely after the weekend series against LA, losing 3 of 4 is not what you want to do going into the All-Star break. Not what you want to do when you had such a big lead in this division. It's kind of basically completely erased. I think they're not even first in the division. I can't recall off the top of my head. They might still be a couple games ahead of Houston, but I know they're flirting basically back down to 500, which is really scary considering how far ahead that they were. They did have a nice start to the week, 2-0 against San Diego. So they managed to put a couple of wins on the board this week, and overall 3-4 week, not absolutely terrible, but that does set them kind of in the middle of the pack right now, trending down, which is not what you want to be doing on this board. Number X up 15, we got the New York Mets 3-0 against Washington, 2-1 against Colorado. So the Mets having a nice bounce back week after last week was a little bit of a destabilizing situation. The Mets starting to be all right. They're back. They're beating up on the lower teams. They're beating up on the teams in their division, the Washington Nationals, and they're putting together some wins. And now it's time. All right, we're going to be seeing them play Atlanta. We're going to see them play Philly coming forward. Are they going to be able to pick up some wins there? Are they going to be able to start beating the teams in these top two rows on a consistent basis? Because I think of all the teams we've talked about so far, the Mets have made up the most ground on the board, and they are the team that might start breaking up to the top of two rows. Number 14, they were in that situation, but this week did not help me keep them there. They went 0-2 against Kansas City for the start of the week, and then they had a nice 4-game set against the Cubs, who had been struggling, and the Cardinals had been using their games against the interdivision there, the Reds and the Pirates, to really kind of make their wild card chances that much stronger, and go 2-2. Not exactly what you want to do. A 2-4 week for the Cardinals. Little bit of a stutter. Probably more in line with what we're used to seeing the Cardinals so far. They had that hot run there and it's probably cooled off, and I'm starting to believe it. Number 13, moving on up. Wearing the hat for these guys this week because I think they are the team making the most progress right now all over this board. This is, I think, the highest they've been in 2.5-3 months, if not since early April. And a lot of that, they just struggled. They had injuries. And some of their guys are starting to come back. They go 2-2 against Atlanta, 2-1 against the Blue Jays. Nice winning week, back-to-back winning weeks, and they're beating up on some teams that are playoff teams. Jays were a playoff team last year. Atlanta was a playoff team last year and is currently a playoff team. We like to see this, and I think Arizona is only going to get stronger from here as they start to get their rotation back together, a little bit more confidence in their bullpen, and they almost came back and swept the Jays today with a 7-run fifth inning, which is absolutely crazy. Number 12, starting to fight back a little bit. I like Kansas City, 2-0 against St. Louis, 1-2 against Boston. So it was only a 5-game week. There's still many games above 500. But they're kind of hanging on to this spot. They haven't really done anything impressive that would make me consider moving them up any further. If anything, we got some hungry teams in the Mets and the Diamondbacks right on their tail, though. How they react to this long season, Royals, sure, they've had a great start so far this year. But it's a young core here, young guys that are really going through this MLB season for the first full time in a competitive role. The Royals have not really been in this situation for a number of years. How will that impact the longevity of the season? We do see the wheels fall off a couple of teams when it gets deep into the season. The Royals could be that team. I wouldn't be surprised just because of that lack of experience. Next up, we do have the San Diego Padres, 0-2 against Seattle. 1-2 against Atlanta. 5-game week, 1-4. Not exactly what you want to see. It's like the San Diego curse is almost alive and well for 500. They're trending back to 500. Anytime they get above 500 for a number of games, they always end up back there. Same vice versa. If they ever get below, they always end up back there. So maybe that means they're trending back down to the 500 area, which is the middle of the league. But for now, we do give them the benefit of the doubt because they have had that offensive strength for quite a while now. But 1 week, 5-game week, I'm not going to hold too much. They did drop a couple of spots. Number 10, I do have the Houston Astros, even though they did fall the Texas Rangers this weekend. Didn't hold it all too much against them. It was a tight series, as it always is against the Rangers. Always top watch baseball, must watch baseball. And they started the week off pretty well with that sweep against Miami. Banked a couple of games. Banked some room in this division while other teams continue to struggle. Side of Texas, everyone else, these two guys never really having a chance. So Houston making themselves top 10, I think, is pretty realistic. Number 9, they're cemented here right now. I feel like they've been in this spot for a couple of weeks in a row. They fell pretty quickly over a number of weeks from the top 3, and they kind of hit 9th, and they've stopped dead. And I think it makes sense going 2-2 against Arizona, tough team on the up and up. 2-1 against San Diego. Tough team, kind of on the up and down, whatever you want to say. So a nice solid winning week for the Atlanta Braves against two teams that they're going to be fighting for that playoff spot with. And I think that speaks for where they are exactly. Number 8, keeping them here for one more week. They did manage to have their first series win in don't know exactly how many. I think it was since the beginning of June. So it's been a little bit of a free fall for the Yankees. The series with Baltimore was super intense, and they almost pulled off the sweep on the game today, but gave up 3 runs in that 9th inning. Friday night, balls flying, benches clearing, just absolutely crazy watching these Baltimore Orioles and Yankees play. Yankees did lose the series earlier in the week to the Rays. Tampa Bay kind of trying to fight their way back into this hunt. Both the Yankees now, and I think the Orioles are sub 600, which is the first we've seen those two teams doing that this season. And so maybe they're opening the door. The Rays are hungry. Can they make up the ground? Number 7, got the Milwaukee Brewers. They do fall out of the top row. It's been, I think, back-to-back somewhat struggling weeks now for them. Might even be 3 in a row. 1-2 against Pittsburgh, 1-2 against Washington. Not really teams that you are going to keep struggling. If you're struggling and then you lose to these two teams back to back, I know Pittsburgh's climbing, they're fighting. They had Paul Skeens one of the games, but if you're in a 3-game playoff set and you're playing Pittsburgh, you're going to have to be able to beat out that kind of situation, and Milwaukee needs to figure it out. The one thing they do got going for them, they did build that massive games lead in their division, but we got some hungry teams and some young teams that are going to be able to do it, and they're going to keep competing in this division. It's totally up in the air, going all the way down to number 24. It's not out of the question like you might think it is. Obviously, based on this board, I don't really think these teams are going to catch up, maybe giving St. Louis the best odds of doing that, but don't count on it. The power rankings can get shaken up like crazy. Like this, number 6, into the top row now. Can't really ignore them anymore. They just managed to keep winning, and after finishing the series last weekend against the Yankees with that solid win, they continue winning. 2-1 against Oakland, 2-1 against Kansas City. Not putting any sweeps on the board, but at the same time, winning is winning. And when we're talking about the rest of these teams in this bottom row, or in this top row, no one's really been blowing the lights out. Like, there's been one team, maybe number 1, but the rest of the teams have had their struggling moments, especially recently. Number 5, right in front of the Boston Red Sox, we do have Minnesota. 2-1 against the White Sox, 1-2 against San Fran. So a 500 week. Didn't sweep the White Sox. Sure, they win, and it's kind of expected at this point. If you're going to be a top row team, you better beat the White Sox. But then falling, right? Not really getting a whole lot of momentum going against the San Fran team, again, who doesn't have a whole lot going for them at this point in the season. So Minnesota, winning week, We're in this exact same spot last week. The only thing that really stopped them from falling is Boston. I still think Minnesota does have the edge if they play a 7-game series, 5-game series. But hopefully we see those guys play soon. In front of them, teams are struggling too, but I can't put Minnesota ahead of them just yet. Next up, LA Dodgers 0-3 against Philly, 1-2 against Detroit. So if there's any team I'm considering really starting to drop next, it's going to be the LA Dodgers. And Dodgers have now put up sub 600 win percentage over the last season, I guess now, at this point in the season. And there seems to be some glaring holes. Just watching the series with Detroit this weekend, they had leads and just couldn't hold them. I can't really put my finger on what it is. Of course, they don't have Mookie Betts. I do factor in the fact that Mookie Betts is going to be back in this roster, and he is going to be a big impact and make big differences and pick up wins where they normally wouldn't. So that does help, but if you put up a couple more weeks or even just one more week like they did this week, they went 1-5, right? They do that again, and these two teams have winning weeks. They're possibly out of the top row, and that I can't really keep them up there much longer. Number 3, avoiding a complete series sweep this week. Went 1-5 this week. The Orioles, after being put into place number 1, it feels like every time I put them there, they do have a kind of crappy week. 0-3 against the Cubs, and then 1-2 against the Yankees. It was kind of rough for the Orioles. They just could not score with runners in scoring position, and I think there's a streak going there where they just did not have any runs whatsoever. But at the same time, I'm not going to punish them going 1-5 on 1 week, considering and forget about everything else we've seen so far this season. But at the same time, this is like not what you want to see the Orioles. There are some struggles that are some voice for some concern, but at the same time, we have other teams struggling up here as well. Milwaukee, all these guys. Boston's pretty much the only one that hasn't struggled. Even the Yankees, like I said, hadn't won a series since June. So you got to keep some of this in mind. It's a long season. You're going to have some struggles, but Orioles, what are you going to do? Number 2, back up there. Again, another team that didn't really give me reason to keep them there, honestly. Another struggling team in this top row. 1-3 against Detroit, 1-2 against Tampa Bay. The difference being here, why I put them back in front of the Orioles, is maybe I debated not putting the Orioles at number 1 last week. I thought about maybe not giving them the benefit over the Guardians, and felt like that was the situation. I liked how the Guardians played against Tampa Bay over this weekend, not so much liking how the Orioles matched up with the Yankees. I liked how the Guardians did okay against Detroit. They 4-game set could have went easily 2-2. So we got two teams like Tampa and Detroit who are trending up, whereas the Orioles were playing teams like the Cubs and Yankees who in theory were trending down. So those are the little things I think about when kind of making the difference between these two teams. I know they were swapped the other way last week, and they both had pretty miserable weeks, but let's see how the All-Star break goes. We're going to have basically 10 games for most of these teams before we figure out who is going to be where for the next power rankings. Again, not going on next week, but guys, because number 1, I think at this point, they have proven it. I've maybe made the mistake of dethroning them last week. They're pretty much unanimously, I think, at this point, the number 1 across everybody's power rankings. 3-0 against the Dodgers just pretty much cemented it for me. I don't even care how that lost to the Oakland A's over the weekend. Heading into the All-Star break, being top of the league, makes a little sense that you're going to take your foot off the gas, especially watching Sunday's game today, giving up 18 runs or whatever it was. There you guys have it. Heading into the All-Star break, halfway point of the season. I know we're games-wise, we're past that, but this is what a lot of people mark as the halfway point, and maybe it's time to do some prediction videos. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you would change, etc., and we will see you for that next video.